What's up, people? I'm back. It is Saturday, February 20, no, February 19th. I almost said 20th. February 19th, a lovely cold Saturday evening here in Pacific Northwest, USA. And I'm just going to get into it tonight. No preamble, no rambling, no rant. I'm just going to get right into the music talk tonight. I've been thinking about doing this video for a couple of weeks. In fact, I started doing it a few weeks ago and then had to cut it short because I just had something came up. So I'm back and I'm here and I'm going to talk about the Shamen's En-tact album. Now, Shamen is a band that a lot of people dislike, and I can understand why. The Shamen, I mean, in my opinion, the Shamen only have one album that really deserves anybody's listening time. I don't mind most of their stuff, but I wouldn't listen to it a second or third. I wouldn't put it on the record player again. But they have one album, En-tact, that I think warrants a deeper discussion. And I really like the album. Again, I understand why people don't like it. It's kind of cheesy. The Shaman's message was positivity and awareness and expansion of the mind and the psyche, and it's kind of cool. I like bands like that have a message that's different than most, even if it's on the positive end. And the Shamen were always about like positivity and reaching that fourth and fifth and sixth and 10th dimension through drugs, and they were very pro drugs as well. So I think that the Shamen, even though they came across as a little cheesy, they definitely had some songs and one album that were really, really good. And they had certain members of the band that would come in and out. They had one constant member, but there was one period of time in the late 80s, early 90s that the Shamen were really cool, I think. And I'll try to explain why. So the Shamen are Scottish dudes. They started in the early 80s and they were kind of a forgettable, in my opinion, a forgettable indie rock band. Colin Angus was the main member, and he was always the one continuous member throughout the history of the band. I don't know a lot of their history in the early 80s when they first started. I do have the albums like Drop and Gorbachev We Trust. These were albums that were just, I don't know, they were forgettable indie rock albums. They weren't bad, they weren't good, they were produced kind of in a muddy way. Excuse me, in my opinion. Like they weren't anything that stood out. And I remember when I discovered them in the late 80s when I was 15 years old or whatever, I was like, okay, even at that age, there's so much other stuff that was better. So yeah, I think a lot of people felt the same way. I think they had a very small fan base, but I don't think anybody was super super passionate about them. And if I'm wrong, correct me. If anyone watches this and you're a fan of that era, please let me know. But yeah, they had a slight political edge to them, but they were forgettable indie rock pop back then. Then in the late 80s, they started discovering electronic music and the rave scene started, and they started employing electronics, and acid house had a big effect on them, and they started trying to explore that angle. And the indie rock thing was still there, but they started transforming in the late 80s. This was kind of the start of it too, right here. This is Transcendental. And this is a damn good record for what it is. I think it came out in 1988, I want to say. Yeah, 1988. Transcendental. This is the first Shamen record I ever heard. And it's cool. I mean, it sounds like a late 80s acid house track, but with Colin Angus singing on it. And it's not bad. Like, they take those indie rock aesthetics that they had, their songwriting abilities and their production approaches, and they applied it to a more dance oriented feel. And it's pretty good. I would recommend picking this single up. By the way, I don't think you're going to have any problem finding any Shamen record. I don't think anything they do is very expensive now, even their old stuff. I think pretty much all their stuff is pretty easy to find. Could be wrong, but again, the Shamen are one of those bands that you know, they're not going to break the bank if you're looking to spend some money on some old Shamen records. I think the majority of them, the vast majority, are pretty cheap and easy to find. So there's that. Now I want to say, I'm going to check this. Excuse me while I read the credits here, but they did this song with Bam Bam. To be frank, I don't really even know who that is. He was a remixer DJ dude. I don't know. This is the only record I have with his name on it. But this was, I think, pre Will Sonat. And Will Sonat is a name that you need to know if you like that era of Shamen. Will Sonat was not with the band in the early days. And then he came, I think he came on board with this single here, You and Me and Everything. I think. I could be wrong on this. Someone correct me. Let me read the credits here. It just says, yeah, I don't see his name on it. Angus. Looks like it's a Colin Angus song. But I think Will Sonat showed up here around this area. And this is another good acid dance rock song. A decent single, You and Me and Everything. And they released an album called Forward, which I have. I wasn't able to find it. It's a 10-inch actually. I think that's probably why I couldn't find it. My 10 inches get lost amongst all of my 12 inches because the vast majority of everything I own is a 12-inch record wise. So they did put out an album called Forward, which was their first foray on in album form into acid house. And it's not bad. It's pretty good. It's like a kind of a goldish black cover. And nothing great, but it's pretty good. Again, I have it somewhere. I just couldn't find it, but I don't think it's hard. I don't think it's hard to find. If you're looking for it, you can go find it for a decent price. But that's around the time that Will Sonat came into play. And I think that album came out in 1989, the same year that single came out, You and Me and Everything. And so after they put out Forward, which was a pretty big leap from everything they had done prior to that, they put out this single, Omega Amigo, and this came out in 1989. And this is when the En-tact phase started, and Will Sonat is on this record, and you can hear it. Like if you go and you listen to every Shamen album, there is something that people call them Will Sin. It's something that Will Sin brought to the Shamen that was edgier, more interesting, more experimental. Frankly, better in my opinion. I think everything Will Sonat did for the Shamen was good. He made this band better because everything before Will Sin and after Will Sin did not measure up to anything they did in this period. This is a 4-tracker. It's got 4 mixes. Well, in fact, actually PH1, that's the B-side. I think there are 3 mixes and then PH1 is the B-side. Good song though. And this original version ended up on the En-tact album, by the way. And again, one of the things I love about En-tact too, just to sidetrack here a little bit, but there are lots of different versions. There are tons of mixes. It depends on if you bought the European release, and each region in Europe, there's a slightly different release. And then the US had their own release with different versions on that. So I'll go through that, but part of the problem, excuse me, my phone there. Part of the fun of this, part of the problem is my phone is ringing and I forgot to turn it off. But part of the fun of this album is there are just so many different versions. It's really fun to talk about for me. It's just, you can get lost in all the different versions of singles and remixes and everything else. So this was the first time the Shamen started becoming the Shamen as we know them today. Or I don't even know if they're around today. Are they? I don't think they are. But this is Pro Gen, aka Move Any Mountain. This would later get re-released with different mixes, and it would be called Move Any Mountain. But this was the original release, Pro Gen. And this is a really, really cool cover. I always like this cover. Check that out. And we basically have the Paul Oakenfold remix on the A side. Let me take that out so there's no glare. The A side has the Paul Oakenfold Land of Oz remix. which is so good. Again, I don't like anything Paul Oakenfold's done probably for 30 years now, but there was a time there in the late 80s, early 90s where Paul Oakenfold just killed it, man. He was so good. Everything he did was awesome. And he does a mix of Pro-Gen here. And then the B-side has a Ben Chapman mix of Lightspan. And Lightspan is another great song that would end up on En-tact in a different form, depending on which country you bought it from. There's different mixes of Lightspan as well. And here's the remix part of Pro-Gen, Move Any Mountain. Slightly different, as you can see. I'll hold up the other ones so you can see the difference. Slightly different, see there? And also, you can't really see it, but it's a C mix right here, kind of in white. You see that? C mix. Now, I don't know if C mix stands for Mr. C. Those of you, most people probably know the Shamen for Mr. C. He was not part of the band yet. He was sort of like a guest vocalist at this point. And he would make his voice known on Make It Mine, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But this has got some really cool remixes. Most notably, this has got the Renegade Soundwave mix of Lightspan. It's called Lightspan Soundwave, as you can see. Excellent Renegade Soundwave remix. I talked about Renegade Soundwave in my last video. I forgot to mention, those guys did a ton of killer remixes. If you ever see Renegade Soundwave anywhere on a record doing a remix, pick it up. Anything they ever did is great. You want to get it. But this, if I were to buy one of the two versions of this, it would be this, because it has Renegade Soundwave mix on it, which is totally worth it. Now, this was the single that came out after Pro-Gen. I want to say this came out in 1990. I'm pretty sure it did. Prior to En-tact. I'm going to try and go in order here as these were released too. This is Make It Mine. This is when Mr. C came into action with the Shamen. He's the goofy rapper that we all probably know the Shamen by. He popped up here. This is the first time he popped up. Or, you know what? I think, now that I think about it, I think he is on the C mix. It's hard to tell, but I think this might be officially the first time Mr. C popped up and had anything to do with the Shamen. But this is the first official single that he rapped on. And this has a B-side on it called Something Wonderful, which is cool. The Shamen were very much into sampling too. Around this time, they sampled a lot of sci-fi and horror movies, like well, one of the singles coming up here, Hyperial, he sampled Evil Dead 2, and they sampled Evil Dead 2. They sampled a lot of really cool, funny, goofy horror movies. So that's Make It Mine, and then this is the remix version of Make It Mine. You see, remix. Let's see who. Oh, they put the Oakenfold remix of Pro-Gen again on this. I forgot about that. They were really hammering that song everywhere. They couldn't release that song enough. It was huge at the time. But the remixes here are pretty good. This is the weakest single from the album, in my opinion, Make It Mine. It's all right. It's not bad. It's not the strongest cut from the album. Now I'm going to get to the album here. And this is where it gets fun for me. Now this is I still have the shrink wrap on it, as you can see. The old hype sticker is still here. This is the American version. Now, these all had different track listings. Like this has, I'm trying to remember, this one has the Graham Massey mix of Human Energy, and the version of a Hyperial on this is the William Orbit mix, and the version of Lightspan is the Ben Chapman mix. And you know, there are different mixes here. Now, if you buy the European version, like the UK version, there are different versions. So it's worth getting as many versions of this. You have to know what versions you're getting. And I have a favorite version of this, which I'll get to here in a minute. But this is the UK or the US version. I think the version of Move Any Mountain is, again, the Paul Oakenfold mix. I mean, the Oakenfold mix popped up everywhere at the time. But this is En-tact. This is the cover. The cover even varied a little bit depending on where you bought it. But I think, when we talk about En-tact, I think En-tact is, I did a video for Happy Mondays, Pills and Thrills and Belly Aches last year, which was produced by Paul Oakenfold again. Those two albums, in my mind, are two of the most important albums ever released in terms of bridging that gap of indie rock into dance culture. Pills and Thrills did it really well. And as corny as you want to think this album is, and it is corny, don't get me wrong. I love this record, but part of its charm is how earnest it is in its corniness. They had a message, and the message was positivity, and it came across kind of goofy sometimes, but they were very earnest about it. And I think that should be admired. They had a message, and they took it seriously. And also drugs. They were very much, again, about expanding your awareness through drug intake. And so, it wasn't a frivolous thing with them. To them, it was a serious thing. They had something to say about it, and they wanted to impart what they thought about, how drugs could expand somebody's awareness and perception of the world. And they took it very seriously. And this is the first time they really outwardly started to do that. But at the same time, they were making, they were marrying that indie rock sound to rave culture. Because a lot of these songs are just really catchy pop hooks, but made in the techno and house world. So, you can poop on this record all you want, but this is one of the key bridges of indie rock to dance music, mingling the two and making it work. This is one of the most, and arguably the most important record to ever do that. The Shamen En-tact, the US version. Now, I bought this version, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember. This is like a re-release. Let me take it out of these sleeves. Sorry about the glare. It's kind of dark. It's dark here now, and I got some lights and things are glaring, but there's my reflection. This is a repress that One Little Indian put out. It's on double vinyl. There are two records in here. The original UK version actually had 2 records, but the versions were all really edited. They were pressing it so DJs could play it. So each side had, 10 minutes of music on it for optimal playback sound quality. So DJs would play it in clubs, and it would sound big and booming, and the bass would be nice and warm and things like that. They did that a little bit here, but the first album here is basically, this is a repress of the US CD. Now, the US CD basically had those tracks that I just talked about on the US vinyl, but then they also crammed a bunch of remixes on at the end. And they were all edited. They weren't the full remix versions. If you had the 12 inches, you would know that. But the US CD took a bunch of edited versions of the remixes that had been out in Europe and plastered them onto the US release. And then One Little Indian, their label in the UK, about 10 years ago, I don't know when, they did this. And the second disc has all of those edited remixes tacked on the second disc. So it's kind of cool, because you can't really find those edited remixes anywhere else on vinyl. I think some of them you can only find here. So as a curiosity, I picked it up, and it sounds pretty good. The sound quality is good. It's nice having those edited remixes, and the remixes are definitely worth having. There's some, well, I'll get to the remixes. My favorite singles from them are coming up here in the remixes, but this is a good edition of this. I would recommend this if you like En-tact. It's the One Little Indian repress that came out within the last decade, I think. Maybe a few years less, maybe a few years more than that. I can't remember. Now, this is my favorite version of En-tact. And if I had to recommend a version to anyone who wants to pick this album up, I would get this. This is the Czechoslovakian Globus International press. Now, why is this the best pressing? Well, number one, I thought this was cool. It comes on green, aqua green vinyl, which you colored vinyl hounds out there, you can love that all you want. I don't really care too much about colored vinyl. The aqua green is good. And this is a good pressing. It sounds pretty good. Also came with like a little, a card, an insert with track titles and no lyrics, just images, but credits and stuff like that. Now, why is this my favorite version? Well, this has the full unedited versions of Evil is Even and Hear Me, Oh My People. Arguably, the two greatest tracks the Shamen ever did. Those tracks are outstanding pieces of experimental electronic house and techno music. And they only got released in their edited versions on CD and vinyl on every version in the world. For some reason, and something tells me it might have been a mistake, the Czechoslovakian market back in 1991, I think this got released a little bit later, maybe 1990. At any rate, this Czechoslovakian pressing has the full 13.5-minute version of Evil is Even, which is excellent. My favorite Shamen song. And part of the reason why is it's so long. It's a really cool, tribal, primal, fun song. And it's instrumental. There's no singing, no Colin Angus, no Mr. C, none of that shit. It's just like a 13.5-minute tribal journey. It's so good. And also, Hear Me, Oh My People, the full version of that is 7.5 minutes long. Most of every other version you find, I think it's like an edited, like a 4 or 5 minute edit. And that song was fully mixed by Orbital. And again, it's an instrumental version. It does have a vocal sample on it, but there's no lyrics on it. And frankly, it sounds like an early Orbital song. And you Orbital fans know that that is a good thing, because Orbital is and was awesome. So check out the Czechoslovakian pressing. The label is Globus International. And I think this is on black vinyl too. It's not just on this green. I'm pretty sure it came out on black too. And in fact, I know it's on black because I have one. I just thought about that. That's how I know. It's not here with me, but I know it did come out on black as well. That's probably easier to find, I would guess. But the only thing that sucks about this Czechoslovakian pressing, it's a single record. So they cram, each side of vinyl, there's like 25, 30 minutes of music, which obviously doesn't lend itself to the best sound quality, but this one, it still doesn't sound that bad. Anyway, pick up this Czech pressing of En-tact. This is the greatest version of this record. The mixes and the full versions make it worth it. And if this is the only version out there you can find on vinyl, you should find it, right? And you want the full version of Evil is Even, trust me. It is so good. Definitely that and Hear Me, Oh My People were the two best things they ever did. Now, after that album came out, they started re-releasing all their stuff in the United States. And this is the US version of Make It Mine. I just thought I'd show this because it was here. I don't want to spend too much time showing the same record over and over again. But this is the US version of Make It Mine. I think it has one mix on here that isn't on any of the UK ones. The rest of them are all remixes that had been re-released. This is yet another version of Make It Mine. It's got the promo cut there, as you can see. This is different because it has Moby remixes, which are good. The Moby mixes are really good of this. And then it has the full Possible Worlds single. Possible Worlds got released. It's a single in the UK with 4 remixes on it. They're all here. So side A, you get 3 Moby mixes of Make It Mine. And then side B, you get 4 mixes of Possible Worlds. So this is definitely worth having as well. And Mr. C is on that. Again, Mr. C was not a full-time member up until Make It Mine. And then I think when Will Sin died, I forgot to mention this. Will Sin died while they were making the video for Move Any Mountain. He drowned. Super weird. The dude was, I don't know, the guy was in his late 20s, I think. I don't know that he was even 30 years old yet. But he was really taking the Shamen to this next level. And he seemed to have a vision that Angus did not have, at least musically, and he drowned. So yeah, it was a very weird time for the Shamen. They were just building and they were just hitting their peak, and then their creative master drowned. And so after he drowned, I think Angus brought in Mr. C to, help out with music duties. And Mr. C actually is a damn good DJ and is a pretty good music producer. He puts out his own stuff and he's a very capable music producer. But in terms of his rapping, we've all heard Mr. C and his rapping. Okay, if you if you want to hear the worst of it, go listen to Ebenezer Good. Okay, Ebenezer Good is the biggest single from the following album after this. That was called Boss Drum. Mr. C's a cool guy. I actually like him. Every time I see an interview with him, he seems super chill and he's funny. He has a great sense of humor. But those of you who were around in 1992, you remember Ebenezer Good. Like if you're only 20 now or whatever, you're younger, you have no idea what Ebenezer Good is. I would recommend going and checking that out. The song's terrible, but it's sort of purposely so. Ebenezer Good basically was a song trumpeting ecstasy culture. Ebenezer Good is a metaphor for E. And I'm not going to sing the lyrics for you, but I recommend watching the video, listening to the lyrics, and appreciating Mr. C's wittiness. The song's horrible. The lyrics are so dumb, but when you step back and you realize what he's doing and what he's trying to say with his lyrics and how cheeky he's actually being pretty damn funny. And the song got to #1 in the UK. And it was pretty popular here in the US as well. So anyway, it's a terrible song, but I appreciate it because of the message that they were trying to secretly blast out there. And it wasn't that much of a secret. Everyone knew what he was doing. He was celebrating ecstasy. And, good for him. He got away with it. It was a #1 single. How do you not like that? Okay, moving on. This is the Shamen again with Hyperial. This is the original version with the William Orbit remixes on it. This also has a B-side called In the Bag on it, which is really good. But this full remix is the album version on En-tact in the US market. So when you buy the US version of En-tact, you're getting this mix, the William Orbit mix. That's not the case in the UK or Czechoslovakia. You got the original mix. So now, this is my all-time favorite Shamen single, and frankly, one of my all-time favorite remixes, period, of any time period. And that is the Jack Dangers mix of Hyperial. Those of you who don't know who Jack Dangers is, #1, I feel sorry for you. But #2, he is the dude behind Meat Beat Manifesto, one of my personal favorite, all-time favorite bands. And I'm actually surprised I've never done a video on them. I will at some point. I love Meat Beat Manifesto. And Jack does a killer remix of Hyperial here. He does a few actually. One of them's just an edit. And the edited version of this actually ends up on that recent repress of En-tact, that double pack I showed. But the full 8-minute mix is here. And man, you want it. It is so good. One of the best bass lines of all time. I mean, maybe the only other bass line that's better is Meat Beat Manifesto's Radio Babylon. Jack knew how to create a bass line. Let me just say that. This is a fantastic remix and by far the best Shamen single. Pick that up. Now, this is a US reissue of Moving Mountain. Got the promo hole there. You can always tell it's a US edition by that. More mixes. In fact, who's on this? Land of Oz again, the Oakenfold mix. Then we have the Devil mix, the Rude mix, the Sound of Progen, and Bang to the Beat of the Drum, Joey Beltram dub, and the Bones Break master mix. So yet more remixes. Progen 91. They hammered this single. They couldn't make enough versions of this song. People loved it. And then there's this. I just thought I'd show this. This is like a triple pack of remixes of Moving Mountain Progen. Literally, this is 3 records worth of mixes. And actually here on the last side, these are all samples, and these are all little samples of the song itself. So someone could take the little bits of the song and remix it themselves. So the Shamen were encouraging people to do their own remixing. I actually did one too. I had some gear back then and I did a remix, and I'm sure it was terrible. I'd like to find that actually. I think it was pretty good actually. They had all the bits you needed. But anyway, triple pack of, if you can get enough Pro Gen with all these other singles, here's yet another Pro Gen release. So yeah, En-tact was just one of those albums that I think, again, I can understand why people don't like it, because it comes off so cheesy and their message was super corny and, positive, think positively and things will go your way if you think positively. So it was a little naive in that respect, but in my view, the Shamen, I don't think that they were necessarily blindly telling people to just go out and be positive. I think that they were trying to promote people to think differently. And that's why I like them and have always respected them. Nothing the Shamen have done since this time period I've liked. I didn't think Boss Drum was very good. Had some good moments. I didn't think Hempton Manor was good. It was okay. I just think that they got way too into trance. The substance of the music declined when Will Sin died. I think Will Sin, when he died, something happened. He was bringing like an edge to the band that existed on En-tact, and they were bringing in the right remixers and the right producers, and they just had the right sound for a very, very short amount of time. And then Sin died and it all went away. And I think Boss Drum proved that they got a little too obsessed with cheesy house music and trance music. It just didn't work anymore, in my opinion. But their message always stayed the same. And I think that's what I've always respected about the Shamen, is that they were always about expanding your mind and thinking about things differently. Things are not as they seem. And it's up to us as human beings to use our brains as much as we can to come up with our way of looking at the world in a peaceful way. It doesn't mean that it has to be necessarily the right way, just a different way. And that's what I like about the Shamen. And when it comes to En-tact, again, I will hammer this down again. En-tact, I would make an argument that it is the most important album bridging the gap between indie rock and dance culture. It came out in that very fertile time of the late 80s, 1989 specifically, when acid house was still building. It had been around for about a year. People were trying to figure out how to take the acid house sound and marry it with rock. I would argue that En-tact did it better than anything. It's one of the great albums that I think a lot of indie rock people appreciated and a lot of dance people appreciated. I know I did, and I know most people I knew at the time did as well. So I would recommend, if anyone's interested in late 80s, early 90s era electronic music, which I'm assuming most of you are, that's why you're here, listen to En-tact, get the different versions. Again, I would recommend getting the US version, getting the UK version, and then getting that Czech version on Globus International. And listen to the differences. It's fun because each version has different edits and mixes. And you also have to get the 12 inches. Like the 12 inches have even more mixes that offer these different perspectives and takes and approaches. And it's just fun. I've ripped all of these records into my digital archives, and it's fun to pick out my favorite version and then put them together and put my own version of En-tact together, because it's still different. It's not anything like these albums, the way they're sequenced. I do my own sequencing and it makes sense. It sounds good. And it's fun to have all these different options. The Shamen were about this collaboration, I think that was part of their whole expansion of awareness, is also this community aspect, letting everybody come in and have their take and keeping your mind open. And that's something that I've carried with me to this day. So that was an important learning experience for me in terms of taking a message that a band could impart to someone younger like myself and apply it to just everyday life. And that's what En-tact did for me. So check it out. En-tact, any version you can get, I think is worth it. But yeah, US, UK, and Czech. Pick those versions up, listen to the differences. You won't regret it. Okay, I'm going to get out of here. Have a good weekend. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye.